So today, which is March 25th, 2023, I'd like to return to a Jataka tale, one that explores a Buddhist perspective on why we've been born human. Why are we human? What's the point? What's the value of being human? All beings are honored in Buddhist tradition. Our vow is to save the many beings, to liberate, to free the many beings. All beings, it's one of the things that drew me to Buddhist tradition to start with. It wasn't just for people like me, it wasn't just even for people. It was all living beings are included in the great vow of Buddhist tradition. But what makes human a being particularly valuable? It's not a particularly easy way to be a being. There are probably easier ones. Why? Why be a human being? So we'll look at a Jataka tale that explores this. There are 547 such Jataka tales in the Pali tradition. Jataka simply means birth or birthlet. They're past life stories of the Buddha where he shares his own path, what he dealt with on the path of maturing as a bodhisattva, a wisdom being. He faced challenges, he made mistakes, which is one of the great things about the Jatakas. They're not just hagiographies. They're not just going, he was always fantastic, he was always terrific, he never made a mistake, he was surrounded by glowing lights in every life. No, it shows him being flawed, making mistakes, picking himself up and trying again. I find that very inspiring, and it has a kernel of truth. Even if some of these stories are so fantastic, there's a truthfulness, an honesty about revealing your own shortcomings and flaws that in some ways make me trust the Buddha and the tradition he speaks of and which he created essentially through his realization and exertions. I trust it even more because it's not perfect, which is not to say perfection is lacking. He was perfect in trying again and again and again. That's perfect too. There are 34 particularly inspiring Jatakas in the Sanskrit Jatakamala, which means rosary or garland of Jatakas, that had a huge impact on the imaginative life of Asia, were carved and repeated and performed throughout Buddhist Asia, and had a tremendous impact. The caves of Ajanta are filled with Jatakas, the Borobudur, huge construct in Southeast Asia is built around Jataka tales, past life tales of the Buddha. They had a tremendous impact. In any case, I'd like to share one today, which is number 506 in the Pali collection of 547 such tales, which is the Kampeya Jataka, in which the Bodhisattva makes a mistake. So it goes like this. Long ago, when the Kampa River was the boundary between the kingdoms of Anga and Magadha, there was fighting between the two realms. One day, the king of Magadha, defeated in battle, was running from Anga warriors who were in hot pursuit. He came to the river and thought better to drown than be slaughtered by foes. And spurring his horse forward, he plunged into the water. Now, down below on the river bottom, the Naga serpent king, Kampeya, was enjoying himself listening to Naga musicians play on instruments of ivory and gold and watching Naga maidens dance. For his delight, the river bottom had been strewn with gold and silver powders, and the flame-bright coral trees were hung with diamonds, rubies, emeralds, pearls, a fantastic realm of wealth and pleasure. Suddenly the music stopped, and the maidens who were dancing grew still. Looking up, the Naga king saw a man on horseback drifting down through the water. He saw nobility on the man's face, and taking a liking to him, allowed horse and rider to arrive safely on the river bottom. Rising from his pearl throne, the Naga king offered the stranger his own seat, saying, "Fear nothing, friend. I have only your welfare in mind. Who are you, and why have you entered my realm?" Then the defeated king of Magadha opened his heart and poured out his troubles, and the Naga king said, "The solution is simple. You shall rule both Anga and Magadha." For 6 days the king of Magadha remained on the river bottom as the guest of Kampeya, the Naga king. But on the 7th day he rose from the river and, with the Serpent King's protection over him, defeated the king of Anga. After that he ruled both kingdoms, and all warring ceased. And there was great friendship between the human king and his benefactor, the king of the Nagas. To honor their friendship, the new king of the two realms had a pavilion made of gold and jewels on the river bank. That's where it was built. And there each year the glittering Serpent King, having risen from the river and taken human form and surrounded by many retainers, received precious gifts from his friend, the human king. Now, at that time, the Bodhisattva, that is the Buddha Shakyamuni in a past life, was not either of those characters. He was the eldest son of a very poor family. Awed by the riches he saw each year at that gift giving, he couldn't help himself. He wished that one day he too might enjoy such a life. Not long after this, he died. The Naga king, Kampeya, also died. Given the store of his merit, the Bodhisattva's wish was fulfilled, and he came into life as the new king of the Nagas of the Kampa River. Looking down along his long, Looking down along his long serpentine body, the Bodhisattva thought, "What have I done? I have gained riches, but have wandered from the true path. My aim is enlightenment. To achieve it, I must be human." So though surrounded by the riches he desired, he felt not joy but shame. But when the Naga maiden Sumana exclaimed, "Has a god taken life among us? Such is the beauty of our new king," and the Naga musicians took up their instruments of crystal and gold, and the Naga maidens began to dance, the Bodhisattva put aside his sorrow, took human form, and sat in splendor on his throne of pearl. Then, with Sumana as his wife, the Bodhisattva ruled his underwater realm. One day he thought, "Though I dwell in splendor as a serpent king, I am far from ultimate truth. It is better to be human, even one without wealth or power. For even an ordinary human being can practice the path of truth and liberation. This is not the true freedom." So to develop the virtue he'd need to regain human life, the Bodhisattva kept a fast, one day each week. In time, finding this too easy, he decided to return to the land once a month and keep his vows of fasting and nonviolence there. When the half moon came, he left the river and, taking the form of a silver cobra, coiled around an ant heap and lay in the dust with lowered hood. The people recognized him as the Naga king. It did not strike or chase him, but offered flowers and perfumes instead. When he returned the following month, they built him a cloth pavilion and spread a layer of clean sand for him to lie on, where he could receive their offerings in comfort. And so a monthly pattern was set. One day, Sumana said to the Bodhisattva, "The world of men is filled with treachery. I want to know that you are safe when you are up there." The Bodhisattva pointed to a clear pool in their garden beneath the river. "If someone hits me, this water will become cloudy. If a winged Garuda, enemy of Nagas, carries me off, the pool will become dry. If a snake charmer captures me, the water will turn the color of blood." Embracing his wife, he left the river and returned to the anthill. Now, A Brahmin who had just learned spells in the city of Takasila heard of this miraculous silver serpent and thought, with my spells, I might control this snake and become rich. Repeating his mantras, he approached the great being who lay coiled in his cobra form. To the Bodhisattva, it seemed as if fiery splinters and iron nails were being pounded into his head. His mouth burned and his eyes stung. Flicking out his tongue, he raised his head and spread his hood. But, seeing the snake charmer, he thought, one drop of my poison could shatter his whole body. He does not know my power, but I have taken vows and will not harm him. And lowering his hood, he lay back down. Feeling secure in his power, the Brahmin chewed herbs and spit them on the great serpent's head. A fiery blister arose. He smeared his hands with the herb and dragged the Bodhisattva from beneath his cloth canopy, stretched him out full length on the ground, pinned his head with a forked stick, beat him with a club, and spit more herbs into his mouth, which filled with blood. Snake, he said, you are in my power. Resist, and it will be even worse for you. Then pushing and folding the Bodhisattva's body, he shoved him into a basket, then set off for the next town. Once there, he gathered a crowd and made the Naga Lord dance, and what a dance it was! The great being moved his body with grace and speed, making circles, squares, lotus flowers in the air as 1, 10, 100, 1,000 hooded heads appeared. And the people loved it, tossing jewels and coins, so that the Brahmin, gathering their offerings, found that he had gained some wealth. He thought, if this snake brings me such reward in a small town, what might it do in a city or even at the royal court? Then he bought a cart, put the Naga king's basket on it, and drove toward the capital city of Benares. In towns along the way, while the Serpent King's dance brought him more wealth, the Bodhisattva himself refused to eat. If I eat the frogs he kills for me, he'll only kill more. I cannot allow it. I have taken vows. Offered fried cakes and honey, he thought, if I eat these delicacies, I'll be stuck in this basket until I die. And again, he would not eat. By now, Sumana, the Bodhisattva's wife, was worried. Her husband had not returned. She went to the pool and found it was the color of blood. A snake charmer then had him. At once, excuse me one second. At once, she set out to find him. Arriving at the ant-heap, she saw signs of a struggle. Taking the form of a radiant goddess, she flew through the air and, alighting outside a village, heard talk of a serpent's dance and a snake charmer's journey to the capital. Weeping, she rose again and flew toward Benares, where preparations for a royal show were already underway. The palace courtyard had been spread with white sand and a fine carpet set there. The crowds waited. The king sat expectantly on his throne. Then the Brahmin, setting a jeweled basket on the carpet, charmed the great being forth. The Bodhisattva danced, forming circles, squares, lotus flowers, making 10, 100, 1,000 hooded heads appear. Jewels fell like rain. Suddenly the Serpent King stopped. Holding his body erect, he gazed up into the sky. The crowd, the Brahmin, and the king all looked too, and were filled with wonder. For standing in the bright air was a beautiful, shining woman, weeping. Tears fell from the great being's eyes too, as he crawled back into his basket and lay hidden. Excuse me one second. Hang on one sec, please. Thank you. Okay. The king called up to the woman in the air, "Are you a goddess? For not human is your power and shining beauty. Who are you, and why do you weep? Is it for rage or for sorrow?" "I am no goddess," answered Sumana, "but a Naga queen who weeps for rage and sorrow both. My lord's power, like that of Shakra, king of the gods, is so great, his single breath might destroy your city. Yet such is his love of goodness that he dances harmlessly before you. He has taken vows and will not strike. Though his body is bruised and blistered, his sides bony and thin, beneath the Kampa River 16,000 Nagas call him king. This snake charmer has taken a great lord for his prophet. As one desirous of merit, will you not, great king, set him free?" Then the king offered the Brahmin the finest bull of his herd, 100 of the best cows, 100 chests filled with gold and gems, and a golden throne shaped like a flax flower with blue cushions like petals. "Release the holy Naga lord," he said, "and all this is yours." "Willingly," said the Brahmin. The serpent king Bodhisattva came out of the basket and, going into a flower, put off his serpent shape, reappearing as a young man in robes of gold. There he stood, handsome as a god, and Sumana, descending from the sky, stood beside him. Those who had come thinking to simply see a serpent's dance were well rewarded. After the king and his nobles escorted the Bodhisattva and Sumana back to their river, before parting he asked if he might see their splendid underwater palace. Then all of them, entering the river together, descended to the river bottom. The human king and his court were astonished by the riches they saw there. "Why, great being," asked the king, "did you leave such magnificence to lie on an ant-heap in the dust?" "All such treasures," said the Bodhisattva, "is nothing compared to the treasure of human birth, through which enlightenment may be realized. Hills of pearl, groves of flame coral trees, clusters of jewel fruit, diamonds, emeralds, rubies, sapphires, mountains of gold, lakes of silver. Take what you want and use it for good." Filling chests with treasure, the human king and his court returned to their own realm. However, they'd been given so much gold that as they traveled, the excess spilling from their carts stained the earth, which is why the ground from the shores of the Kampa River to the ancient city of Benares remain the color of gold today. So that's the Jataka. It's classical Buddhism. And yet, there's some real teaching in there from a Zen perspective, which I'd like to take a look at. A Buddhist parable says that a blind turtle swimming in an endless ocean once every 100 years rises to the surface and lifts its head from the water. A board with a hole in it randomly floats on that endless sea. What are the odds that the blind turtle will put its head through the hole in the board? Those are the odds we have each faced in being born human. The odds of encountering the Dharma are said to be even longer, yet here we are, having beaten them. Perhaps a vow lies at the root, a vow and a great deal of work. And yet how easy it is now that we're here to take it for granted. Okay, I'm a human being, so what? I sit in Zazen, so what? Then again, what if there's something more to human life? Something of great potential value, as this tale suggests. The story is a gift reminding us that human life is precious, and is simultaneously a wake-up call and warning. If we don't make use of the treasure our life now offers, what then? How long might it be before such a chance comes round again? The sea of time and space is vast, and the turtle quite blind. Tibetan Buddhism is clear on the effort it takes to attain human birth. Specific conditions must be met for egg and sperm to coalesce and choose to work together to create a human being. Pure essences of the parents, the five universal elements of earth, air, fire, water, and space, the three biological humors, phlegm, bile, air, plus a fourth link beyond all physical conditions which must be supplied by the parents, that is karmic and emotional, attracting the being to a particular set of parents. After which first begins the arduous work of forming a body and mind, traversing animal forms, rising into a human condition from an initial curd-like mass at one with the mother. Pushed through the birth canal, we take a first breath, and then, at long last, begin the difficult process of individuation, in which we lose our original sense of connection and awareness of the thoughts and feelings of others. We solidify, imagine ourselves more and more alone and isolated, and start reacting as if that aloneness was totally real. Then after all that, if our karma is ripe, we may finally begin spiritual practice, slowly finding our way back to our original sense of complete connection, without at the same time losing what our matured life and its uniqueness have made possible. This work of maturing never ends. But why make the effort to become human? And why, once human, strive to fully mature? From a Buddhist perspective, the answer is our fundamental bodhisattva vow, the vow of selfless mind to know itself, to awaken, and be of benefit to all beings who, in the deepest sense, are not other than ourselves. According to Buddhist tradition, it is only from a human condition that such selfless awakening is possible. This is our human treasure, the treasure of awakening to the real, the realization of the innate aptitude for wisdom and compassion. We become human because of this vow, and mature further because of it as well. It is what propels us, but is not a vow simply made in words. The flower vows to turn to the sun. The apple seed vows to become a tree producing apples. The caterpillar vows to free itself from a cocoon, grow wings, and fly. Our verbal expression of this vow, great vows for all, or the four vows, is a conscious reminder of a fundamental commitment to become what we already are. It is the awakening of a determination, our determination, to fulfill our own potential. Well, there are billions of human beings on Earth. What does it mean to be truly and fully human? Does having a two-legged form with eyes, ears, nose, hands, brain, and feet automatically make us a human being? What does it take to be or become one? If by human being we mean someone wise and compassionate, someone not driven by greed, anger, ignorance, or fear, someone who can be counted on when things get rough, then that number may be relatively small, though oddly, when the chips are down, such people seem to show up as if they've been waiting in the wings all along. The parable of the blind turtle gains power when we choose to become genuinely human ourselves. Clearly, it will take a lot of tries, and the difficulties are important. They are part of how we mature. They force us to grow beyond complacency. As human beings, we recognize impermanence and understand how little time we have in which to fulfill our vow. With human consciousness, we face unfathomable questions. Why are things as they are? Why is there injustice? Why do bad things happen to good people? Why greed, anger, and ignorance? Why environmental destruction, misogyny, racism? Questions that can be hard to live with. Questions that disturb our sleep. And to be clear, the anxiety arising out of a recognition of injustice and impermanence, rather than making us wiser or more compassionate, can make us want to run and hide, make us want to evade and ignore. As human beings, we have many choices. Indeed, we have a range, some good, others less so. This is the realm we call free will. But if we turn away, then the story of the Buddha's home leaving becomes a parody. The privileged prince leaves his sheltering, entitled palace, and upon encountering the four ego-destroying signs, old age, sickness, death, and a path beyond that, let me add that, that's only 3. He turns around, runs back inside, locks the door, and turns up the music. His great vow to find an answer and benefit all suppressed. When the call to the adventure of maturing is refused, the summons to begin the hero and heroine's quest denied, we stagnate and fester. Joseph Campbell mapped out this option clearly in his classic Hero with a Thousand Faces. The monster Holdfast is born and stays stuck where he or she is, unwilling to grow. As human beings, this too is an option. No one is on automatic. And yet, as the Kampeya Jataka makes clear, from a Buddhist perspective, despite the challenges and difficulties, ordinary human existence is supremely valuable. Why? Simply put, it is as human beings that we can practice enlightenment. So we find the following at the conclusion of the Bendoa, Negotiating the Way, one of the very first pieces Zen Master Dogen wrote upon returning to Japan from China early in the 13th century. Even if all the numberless Buddhas in the 10 directions, as countless as the sands of the Ganges, mustered all their might together, and by means of Buddha wisdom attempted to measure and totally know the merit of the zazen of a single person, they could not know the whole of its measure. In this Jataka, a more than human, almost godlike condition of ease, pleasure, wealth, and power is presented by the shimmering, treasure-filled underwater realm of the Nagas. It suggests a kind of place, actually an attractive zone of the psyche that is fluid, not hard and fast, rich and vibrant with beauty, sensuality, wisdom. Inhabited by non-human serpent beings, these Nagas are said to have handsome male or female human heads and upper bodies that trail off to a snake's tail. Sometimes cobra heads, one or several, might appear above their human heads. They can also transform and appear as cobras or as many-headed cobras, or sometimes even as fully human beings, though it's said that if you look closely, you may notice they carry a glittering cobra hood-like aura. They may be sensual, but they are also deeply wise and spiritual. In some ways, it seems ideal, a wonderful fulfillment. Indeed, it is said that the Buddha, recognizing that human beings were not yet evolved, that is, spiritually mature enough to receive the complete prajna paramita, transcendental wisdom teachings, whose heart is form is only emptiness. Emptiness, only form, gave them into the safekeeping of the Nagas. To only partially understand so-called emptiness would be like giving a loaded gun to a child, a dangerous situation from the get-go. So the Buddha wisely gave these deepest teachings to the Nagas and directed them to hold them in readiness until such time as human beings were grown up enough to access them without causing terrible harm. Clearly a wise move given the childish self-centeredness we again see rising in our world today. Fingers crossed we make it through again. Unlike dragons of Western tradition who viciously hoard their jewels and gold, Nagas can be generous and have deep Dharma affinities. Legends of the Buddha's enlightenment relate that the Naga king Kala Nagaraja chanted ancient songs in the assurance of the Buddha's approaching victory over ignorance, and that the Naga king Mukalinda rose from the earth and raised his cobra hood over the newly awakened Buddha, sheltering him from a violent storm. While snakes have been feared, even despised in European traditions, throughout indigenous America, serpent beings are, as in Asia, respected, a good sign for the flourishing of Dharma in the Americas. And why not? Snakes live unseen, mysterious lives in the depths, seem to possess a cool and ancient wisdom, and though mere flesh and bone can flow like water and shed their skin, reappearing as if newborn. The double helix of entwined serpents, the ancient healer's sign, is familiar to South American shamans, and perhaps not coincidentally is also the shape of the serpentine DNA coiling at the core of every cell on Earth. In Kundalini Yoga, the energy rising up the spine is described as a serpent power. In Buddhist tradition, greatly enlightened beings, those who have recovered the Mani wish-granting jewel from the depths, are, like the great Buddhist teacher Nagarjuna, sometimes honored with the name of Nagas. Are these wise Nagas merely a myth? Perhaps the intelligence, curiosity, friendliness, linguistic skills, and sonar vision of whales and dolphins, land-dwelling mammals who 50 million years ago returned to the sea, grew large, complex brains, and developed peaceful social systems, make them real-life models for the mythic serpent-like holders of highest wisdom. Maybe the spray rising from the blowholes on their heads seem to humans on shore like sparkling bejeweled cobra hoods. A professional diver and his camera crew snorkeling among sperm whales, where a sperm whale calf had just been born, recounts they were welcoming us to the most sacred of events, the birth of a new baby whale. They welcomed us, the same species from the same island as those who had killed them less than 30 years before. That is why I know they are so much more intelligent, so much more sophisticated, so beyond us humans. The epilogue to the book This Comes from Carnivore Minds by Bradshaw concludes, despite what humans have done, sperm whale culture remains inclusive, rooted in the belief of mutual respect. For sperm whales, the largest predator on the planet, the counterpoint of victimhood, revenge, is obviously unnecessary, and so it has failed to find a place within their society. Perhaps their seemingly infinite compassion comes from the vast oceans where they live. Their space and time, subject and object fuse in the sperm whale click and coda language that envelops the planet like an invisible connective tissue. It is in this gentle world that we find an ethical exemplar who should inspire our own species' evolution. In short, here there be Nagas, and yet, given our immaturity, rather than learning from them, we are still manipulating and killing these wisdom holders. But given all this, how could a human being struggling with poverty be better off than not just a Naga, but a rich and respected Naga lord? A lord among Nagas would have wealth, wisdom, knowledge, long life, as well as access to beautiful Naga maidens. Who hasn't wished for some form of such a life? Who hasn't wished for beauty, wealth, comfort, pleasure, and an escape from life's difficulties? The Jataka, this one, opens this very possibility, yet at the same time provides a classically Buddhist answer. That's all good, it's true. But it's even better to be human. Why? Because as human beings, we are in the best position to realize enlightenment. This potential is what makes human birth such a treasure, something of greater worth than anything. According to Buddhist tradition, this is why we have been born human, not to be Buddhists so much as to undertake the practice of being authentically ourselves, awake to the non-dual presence of bugs, trees, sun, moon, stars, mountain, rivers, earth, and wind. This Jataka puts it before us. You can have whatever you've dreamed of: wealth, ease, comfort, pleasure, beauty, and long life, but no evolving freedom from ego, or just as you are, problems and all, issues, warts and all, you can take up the way of liberation. In the Kampeya Jataka, the Buddha himself in a distant past life stood at this very crossroads and learned the hard way what was most important. Poverty-stricken, he chose riches and splendor over the pains of an all-too-human life, and then discovered that from the perspective of his own deepest vows, he'd made a mistake. While becoming a Naga lord fulfilled his dreams of comfort and ease, there was a fly in the expensive ointment. As a Naga, he couldn't do what any ordinary human being can do, what you and I can do: practice enlightenment. For that, he'd have to become human again. Oops! However, his ancient vows are still at work, for once he recognizes his mistake, he sets off to regain what he initially had, which is what we each now have and take so for granted: this ordinary human life. As an old adage puts it, be careful what you wish for, you might get it. Mind-born wishes and desires generate their own power. Like vows once set in motion, we must live out their consequences. The Bodhisattva's recognition of failure marks the reawakening of his ancient vow, said to have been made ages ago when he was a sage named Sumedha. In that long ago time, world ages back, he'd met the Buddha Dipankara and, inspired, spontaneously vowed to not just awaken and enter nirvana, but to forgo that and become a full Buddha himself, so as to teach all beings a path of liberation. The story of that initial vow, titled the Nidankantha or Nidanakatha, forms the traditional introduction to the Pali Jataka. The pain and regret he now feels is a positive thing. His vow reveals that he's drifted from the path, even as it guides him back to center. Losing and finding the way is how bodhisattvas develop spiritual muscle, what Zen calls power for the way. No sincere effort is considered wasted. All becomes grist for the vow mill. Still, there's a hook, a challenge, a setup to this fairy tale-like Jataka, which is where its ego-killing venom lies. The treasure we seek is where we are and can be ours if we don't let our chance go by. But will we? There's the rub. Will we use this rare and precious human life to do our best to embody our vow, or will we fritter our all too brief time here away? Of course, our human realm is not all rosy. As we know, there are many conditions where opportunities for insight would be terribly hard to come by. Famines, wars, violence, ignorance, poverty, to name just a few, not only keep the treasure hidden, but generate lasting harm. Working to bring about societies of equality, justice, and peace is bodhisattva work, making the realization of our deepest common humanity more accessible. And there's nothing wrong with satisfaction. Still, how easy it is when seeking some personal heaven to lose sight of our own deepest potential. The core lesson of the Kampeya Jataka, that gaining the world can mean losing your soul, is universal. When Esau sells his birthright to his brother Jacob for a mess of pottage, the greater is lost for the lesser. Blake wrote, "More, more is the cry of a mistaken soul. Less than all cannot satisfy." In the end, the poor bodhisattva who so coveted wealth and splendor renounces them completely, giving away so much treasure that the ground itself turns the color of gold. He refuses literal wealth to gain the treasure we each now have and take so for granted, the treasure of this ordinary human birth with all its challenges, with all its difficulties, just as we are. Roshi Philip Kapleau, commenting on his initial enlightenment, wrote, "But mostly, I am grateful for my human body, for the privilege to know this joy like no other." That's in the Three Pillars of Zen. The Kampeya Jataka reminds us that 2,500 years ago, back when it was first told, human beings already tended to overlook the worth of what they had and what they could do with what they had if they chose. The story is a reminder, a warning, a wake-up call. If you don't believe this is true, just look at the golden-colored earth, it says. Seeing is believing is a very old storytelling device. Sengai wrote, "To what shall I compare this life of ours? Even before I can say it is like a lightning flash or a dewdrop, it is no more. To what shall I compare this life of ours? Even before I can say it is like a lightning flash or a dewdrop, it is no more." Han Shan, Cold Mountain, wrote, "My heart is like an autumn moon, perfectly bright in the deep green pool. Nothing can compare with it. You tell me how it can be explained." My heart is like an autumn moon, perfectly bright in the deep green pool. Nothing can compare with it. You tell me how it can be explained. No metaphors, none, can do our own intrinsic reality justice. The way of the Bodhisattva, of ongoing Zen practice, gives us a map to where our hidden treasure lies. All we need to do is go where X marks the spot, roll up our sleeves, and dig down. The treasure we seek is right here, in this count, this breath, this koan, this aching knee, and onward. We'll stop here and recite our great vows for all.